Hello, everybody. So, Happy New Year to everybody, and it's a first in lockdown interview. So this is a recap of the interview that was done in October with Owen Mullen. So we're here tonight to launch his new book, Family. So I think we'll just get right started. So we've got the news book, Family, and it's about the Glass family, and their business is crime, and they're good at what they do. Vengeance took Luke Glass behind bars, but now he's free and he's never going back. Luke wants out of the gangster life. All he has to do is convince his family to let him go. His brother holds the reins of the South London underworld in his brutal hands. Nobody tells Danny Glass no and expects to live, not even DCI Oliver Stanford, bent copper and one of the Met's rising stars. The way Danny sees it, his younger brother and sister Nina owe him everything. The price he demands is loyalty, and a war with their arch enemy gives him the leverage he needs to tie Luke to the family once more. Luke can't see a way out until Danny commits a crime so terrible it can't be forgotten. Love turns to hate when secrets are unearthed, which pit brother against brother. Left with no choice but to choose a side, Nina holds the fate of the family in her hands. And I've just got some sort of like what people have said about it. It says, in the Glass family, Owen Mullen has created a crime dynasty to rival the Richardsons and the Crays. Heart-pounding, jaw-dropping, with non-stop action. Family is perfect for fans of Martina Cole, Kimberly Chambers, and I think it's Medusa Heller. What readers say about Owen Mullen as an author, they say Owen Mullen knows how to ramp up the action just when it's needed. He never fails to give you hard-hitting thrillers that have moments that will stay with you forever. One of the very best thrill writers I have ever read, and Owen Mullen writes a good story. He really brings his characters to life, and the endings are hard to guess and never what you expect. Which is definitely what you're going to get when you read Family. It is, I would say, I always put books are roller coasters of rides, but this one really is. It's something completely different. If you know Owen for writing his Glasgow books, it's something completely different, but you still get the fundamentals of what you love about his books, basically. So I was going to ask, first of all, get started with the question. So, because this is all going to be all family questions, and we're going to stay away from the other books in this one. If you want to watch the one in October, that obviously covered some of the other books that Owen has written, and I put a link to in the comments with the links that you can buy the books. So if you had to describe Family to someone who hasn't heard about it yet, how would you promote it in words?
Okay, if I was speaking a fast-paced gangland novel set in South London, featuring the Glass family, that's Danny Glass, Luke Glass, and his sister Nina. I think, as you say, it's a bit of a roller coaster, and I think most people won't get.
Okay. So what was your first inspiration that made you want to write a book like Family?
Okay, well, I've always wanted to write a book set in London. I lived in London for quite a long time, and I've got a kind of thing about London. I'm very attracted to it, so I always wanted to make that a setting. And of course, when I started to write, it was crime fiction, and eventually, probably inevitably, I was going to get round to gangsters, crime, whatever it would be. I wrote the opening of the book years ago, maybe 7 years ago. I wrote maybe the first 12 or 14, 15,000 words, which are still in the book, funnily enough. I wrote that, and I set it aside because I get distracted on writing other things, or somebody would say, We're having
Sorry,
trouble
guys.
tonight, aren't we?
Yeah, the joys of technology there. Owen just disappeared for a while there. So how did you go about researching family? Because it's a very interesting subject to cover. And I know there is a lot of authors that obviously do cover the kind of gangland thrillers, but you managed to put a unique spin on yours. So how did you go about doing that?
I spoke to some people who deal with gangsters. I'm fortunate. I mean, I read a lot of articles, and of course, I've seen the movies about the craze, and I understand some of the history there. But I'm also fortunate to have two sources, two particularly good sources. A CID detective in Glasgow who already was helped me on the Charlie Cameron books, and another detective who works with the Met, with the Metropolitan Police, and she was very helpful. So what I did was I spoke to them. I had several conversations with them, and they gave me little insights to the kind of things that happen, what they come up against. They tell me a couple of stories. One or two of them I used. One or two of them I changed a little bit so they fitted what I was doing. And by the end, if you add what we spoke about a minute ago, the dramatic and very well known London background, uh, you end up with a gangland story set there.
Wow, interesting. Um, As family is it's a different book from your previous books. Did you find it easier to write, or did you find it more difficult, or was it just kind of the same? Because as you said that you used like somebody like a police contact that you used for the Charlie Cameron books. Did you find that it was just the same kind of sort of like plotting that you had to do and research, or did you obviously find that this one was completely different from your your previous books? I know obviously your previous books are all set in Scotland or sort of like the Glasgow, Ayrshire area. This one's obviously London.
Didn't find any particular difficulty. The research and the background, the deep background dive that you do is basically the same for whatever it is you're going to do. Uh, in the London thing, I had those sources. What was different from some of the books I've written um, was that right from the very start, even from the prologue, from the grabber, as I call it, I want to have an opening scene that tells the reader, you can stick with this book. There's going to be plenty of action in it. You're not going to be at page 102 and saying to yourself, when is this book going to start? Um, so I really was in the groove with it. I was in the moment with it from page one. I knew how it would start. I knew where it was going and how it would finish. Um, and really, I just went along with it. The characters are so ideally set in the book. Writing it actually, the book's it's fairly long. It's about 106,000 words, so you can't write it in a weekend. So it's kind of important to be having a good time. And I had a really good time, especially with Danny. Danny was my favourite character. You'll ask me that in a second, I'm sure, and I'll tell you. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I probably wrote it over. If you forget the original part, I probably wrote it over 4 or 5 months. And as I write, I rewrite at the same time. I pass the day's work over to Christine. She edits it. She gives me it back. Uh, Action the edits. We talk about what it lacks, what it needs, what it has, and what it hasn't got. I go again. So it's quite a long process. I wrote more because of COVID. I found myself writing most days. COVID was just kicking in when I was in the last third of the book, so that helped. It sounds like a strange upside to such a terrible thing, but that helped um, focus me. That there had no distractions, and I was quite happy actually when I woke up in the morning and knew I was going down to write about Danny and Nina and Luke. I was quite happy with that. I was quite I thought, well, what else would I want to be doing?
exactly. Yeah, I know what you mean. You kind of think, oh, what are you going to do during lockdown? I mean, a lot of people say, oh, did you not want to write a book during lockdown? And I was like, no, no. That's a million questions people have asked me that, and I've said no because I don't have time. This time I had all the time in the world, but I was still like, no. Because I've been doing this for years, like behind the scenes in the blog, I was like, yeah. And then, doing it like this way, I'm still like, no, no. I have so much utter respect for you guys, but I know so much it goes into doing it and how hard it actually is. It's just one of those things that, the struggles as well to get like publishers and stuff like that. And you think, well, what could I write about that's not really been covered? So, yeah, I have uttermost respect for anybody that can sit down and write a book, because
I think
I
I
just
think
couldn't.
I think most writers would tell you that the writing the book, however difficult it may be, is actually, in terms of the industry, is actually the easy part. The tremendous struggles to get agents to get published, and then to promote and be successful. But not
Yeah,
everyone does. Not everyone does think, oh no. I actually asked a woman one time, if you say to someone, here's the example, if you say to someone, can you play the violin? They'll say, well, me, I couldn't play the violin. But if you say to many people, have you written a book yet? They will say, not yet, as if they're going to do it. And I spoke to a woman one time. She was talking to me about my work, and I said to her, have you not haven't you written a book yet? And she said to me, Owen, where would I find the time? As if the time is the only bit she didn't have.
yeah.
Boy, I wish I was her.
We'll get off subject, but I tried to learn to play the violin because I was just like, oh yeah, a lot of my friends like Scottish folk festivals, they all play the guitar, they play the violin, I do a bit of percussion. It's not the greatest thing, but I tried it, and I even tried the whistles, and because I can blow the recorder from school, but I was like, no, it's something that I think you need to be doing from like, for that case, it needs something we need to do from like childhood, but books, yeah. I mean, a short story would be quite cool, I think. But yeah, it definitely would be something. Oh, you never know. Maybe next time this time next year there'll be a book out there with my name on it. But yeah. So
Well,
when writing
the first
family,
the first thing the first thing I wrote was a short story when I was 10, and it won a competition, a schools competition. And then, like decades later, I wrote another short story just before I started to write seriously. And when I read it back, it was quite a long short story, 20,000 words. When I read it back, I was astonished because it was absolutely terrible.
yeah. Yeah. My only claim to fame is that I wrote a poem when I was a child, and it was about myself, and I did a little cartoony drawing of myself with the red hair and the long red hair and the glasses and stuff like that. And then my
Yeah,
gran put it into like, I think it was a Scotsman or one of those like magazines that, I don't know if it was a Scotsman or it was the Woman's Own. It was one of those two ones that she always got. She put it in, and then she got the one day a check arrived at the house for like, I think it was like £15, and I'm thinking, what? With my name on it, what have I done? That? And then it turned out that I actually won, and they published it. And when you look back on it, it's like this childish drawing, like long hair, curly hair, and red glasses. But everyone's like, "Well, that's you." And I was like showing all my friends when I was going down the stairs, going, I'm in a magazine. I'm in a magazine. They were like, Lindsay, that's hilarious. But I'm like, it's just one of those things that you do, and you're just like, as a child, you're just so proud of it. I mean, I probably have written little short stories as a kid, but it's that turning it from like something that you do as a child to actually turn it into like a profession. It is, my hat's off to you guys, because I just couldn't do it. So are you more of a plotter when you write, or and know what's exactly going to happen, or do you decide or do you like the characters like decide in your head sort of, so you're like, well, okay, we're going to go this way, we're going to go that way, or you like, no, we've got to hit all these like kind of like, there's got to be the action in the middle and the start slowly sort of building, and then the end is like the cliffhanger or the outcome kind of thing, or do you just kind of let the characters go, right, okay, we're going to go this way, we're going to go that way. We're going to take him in a completely different direction.
Well, I think the first thing to know and the first thing to remember is that there is no right or wrong way to approach writing a book. Everyone does it the way that they feel is right for them. Some people, like Stephen King, for example, claims that he has an idea and he just starts writing and he sees where the book goes. I don't do that. I always know. Now, I don't plot the whole thing because that would leave no room for any organic movement. What happens when we're plotting here, we'll have a cup of coffee and we'll have a conversation and we just talk through about what would happen and what might happen, what the possibilities are. And often something you haven't thought about will appear. So the plot kind of creeps along, but it creeps along and it changes, but it creeps along towards an already designated spot. It has a direction. We do know where it's going. And I've found in the past, with one particular book, I won't tell you which one, I didn't have the resolution to the plot. And it was really a problem for me because I didn't know really where I was going or where I wanted it to go. And until we sorted that, until that was established, the book kind of stopped and started in the writing process. As soon as I got that, you know where you're headed, and it's easy. So I'm a combination of planner and plotter. I do have a certain plan, but that you do have to. I do anyway. I have to allow a degree of flexibility in the plotting, but the characters don't take over and take me to some magical place. That's not what happens with me. The characters, I'm God. I like to play God. The characters do what I want them to do.
Definitely. Well, I think both ways kind of work, but I like that kind of, you can plan, but then obviously just letting the characters like sort of change certain bits. Kind of makes it makes it what sort of like edge of your seat rather than like a rudimental kind of like this has to happen, and then you start to feel that everything is really structured. It doesn't seem natural. It just seems sort of forced. But I mean, I'm probably pretty biased because I do know Owen really well, that I do always find that Owen's books kind of flow. They've got that edge of your seat sort of excitement, and then you kind of also got the kind of build, the slow sort of build that takes you to the edge, and then you know that you're just going to go down. So how did you go about creating your main characters for this one? Because obviously this time, instead of being like maybe like a couple of sort of like main different kind of characters. If you followed the different series, there were obviously different characters with like the main, and then there was obviously always the backing characters that kind of interlinked. But with this one, it was obviously the Glass family, plus obviously the DCI isn't DI. I just said Oliver Stanford, and then obviously there's all the other sort of like minor characters that came about in this one. So it was quite a collection of different like characters. Did you have a character that you first of all thought, yes, I have to write about? I know you obviously mentioned one of them, and it's going to be a follow question. Was there like other ones that you definitely said that you wanted to have in? Did you know that it was going to be like a brother and a younger brother and a sister, or was it all
Yeah.
going to be all male at some point? Because obviously a lot of London crime books, it was like the Cray twins, two brothers.
Okay.
It
Well,
always seemed to be.
yeah. Okay. When I decided it was going to be a crime family, obviously then we need the family characters. And there's the patriarchal character who's Danny, and Danny has looked after his siblings when their mother ran away from their alcoholic father. That's the background. So there we have Danny. Luke is his younger brother, and all of the older brother Danny. And for a while in the book, that was fine. And it was Danny and Luke and Danny, and the dynamics between them. And then we decided that we needed another dimension, and we introduced the sister. We introduced the sister Nina. Now, when she came along, the book changes again, in that organic way that I was talking about a minute ago. It wasn't there at the very beginning, but when she came along, she added a lot of stuff to it. Not only her own thing, but she adds an interplay with the other characters. And when I read you the extract, I'm going to read an extract that shows that dynamic from very early on in the book. So Danny was such an easy character to write because he's he's quirky. I don't want to say too much about him. He's quirky. He's ruthless. He's ambitious. He's thin-skinned. He's amusing in a kind of dark way, and of course he's a psychopath. Which writing the bad guys is always much. You see, drama is about tension, and tension doesn't normally come from nice people. It comes from some other less attractive or more threatening thing entering somebody's life or entering the story. That's the main part that Danny plays. He's your arch bad guy. That isn't to say that he's the only bad guy, because he isn't, because none of them are very nice people. Readers often like somebody, but I think you've got to look to find what it is that's likable. For example, even Danny has a little bit of humanity to him. When his Kinks record gets broken, he's on the floor and he's crying. You can see there's just that little bit of a person of humanity in there. So isn't it just bad, because nobody is. Luke was easier. He doesn't really want to be a gangster, as when the book begins. And Nina, being the youngest, being and it hasn't done her much good as a person, because she's mean, she's selfish, which all makes her tremendously interesting to write. So creating the characters was all part of the fun of writing the book. Um, and really, they kind of came to me. There was no great angst or great big thinking about it. Danny with the royal family on the wall, the Queen picture of the wall on the wall, even though he's a dreadful, dreadful person, and his love of 1960s pop music. Of course, meanwhile, he's a racist, a xenophobe, a misogynist, a murderer. I mean, it's a nice mix. I don't want
Yeah,
to meet him, but it's a nice mix.
definitely not. No, I'm just laughing when you said about the Queen on the wall, because that's a T-shirt I'm wearing tonight. Is the Queen, and the band, the Queen, not the Queen, the Queen as in Queen Elizabeth. But obviously, and you'd also see my picture on my wall, Run Rig.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to let you do a reading of an extracted reading of Family for us, please, Owen, if you don't mind.
Okay. Okay. Well, now I'll give you a bit of background. I have to apologise because there are a couple of swear words in this. These people are gangsters. I make no apologies for them. They swear. If swearing was the worst thing they did, there would be no problem. But but it isn't. Now, in this part, look, it's right at the beginning of the book. Look, and I've never read this part out before. This is the first time I've read this extract. Um, Luke comes out of Wandsworth prison after serving 7 years behind bars. His young sister Nina is there to pick him up. In the interim, in the 7 years, Luke's a changed man, and Nina has moved into working with Danny. But they never got on, even when she was a teenager. She isn't a teenager any longer. And at this part, she's going to run. She's picking Danny Luke up, and she's going to take him to the party in the pub that Danny owns, that's already been waiting for him, and he doesn't want to go. He starts to ask her how it's all been going, and she tells him in no uncertain terms. He says, "You two still at it? You wouldn't believe it. Didn't think it'd get any worse. And has he? Nina made a face and pulled out into the traffic. The guy is off his fucking rocker, honest he is. One of the reasons I'm glad you're back, he's losing it, look. Maybe you can calm him down. Except, I wasn't coming back. Nina couldn't count on me to referee the feud between she and Danny. He's your brother. He loves you and you love him. Wrong. Can't stand him, never could. Only now I know why. Why? When you get another 7 years of your life to waste, I'll tell you. Reasoning with her wouldn't get me anywhere, but I gave it a shot. You should try more than you do to like him. Don't forget, he was there for us. Nina scoffed at the idea, and he reminds me of it every time he wants me to do something I don't want to do. Bringing up the past is how he keeps us just where he wants us. Whenever I disagree with him, he goes into his martyr routine and brings up how close we were to ending up in care. If it hadn't been for him, she shook her head and overtook a red Vauxhall dawdling in the centre of the road. He's a control freak. Can't you see it? What's he done now? It isn't what he's done, it's who he is. He wanted me to manage the property portfolio, insisted I work out of the office, above the pub, a mouth twisted in a smile that failed. I couldn't take it. He talks to himself, did you know that? Mumbles away under his breath. And the music on that fucking jukebox. It's the 21st century, for Christ's sake. Some of it's all right. Nina agreed, some of it, yeah. In small doses, not all day, every day. Drive anybody round the bend. That would, which reminds me, be warned. He's booked a band. I saw them bringing their gear in as I was leaving. The youngest had to be 75. Can't blame me for giving it a miss. You're not going? I'll be in later. If I'm lucky, after the band stops playing. Nina wasn't joking, and I didn't blame her. Guessing the rest of the script wasn't difficult. Outside the pub, a sign would say, private function. Inside, they'd all be there. New guys, most of them. Press ganged into raising a glass to their boss's younger brother. Somebody they'd heard a lot about, but hadn't met. Danny would bang on the bar, call for silence and propose a toast. To Luke! Cheers for the returning hero. By now, the story of Albert Anderson's swan dive was urban mythology, and me with it. A couple of hookers, part of the tradition, would be laid on, no pun intended. At some point, he'd put his arm round my shoulder and guide me upstairs, away from the noise, into his vision of the future. He lit a cigar and sit behind his desk under the framed photograph of the Queen. He was a staunch supporter of the royal family. God knows where that came from, or how it squared with a life of selling girls and drugs. The booze would make him sentimental. He'd tell me he loved me, and trot out the spiel I'd been hearing since I was a kid, the team glass speech. Then I'd be a bad sport and spoil it with what I intended to say. Will you tell him today? Maybe. I'll see how it goes. She squeezed my fingers with a free hand and I said, drop me in Tooting Broadway. Say I'm sorry. I'll catch up with them later. And that the car worked. I'm impressed. Do your own dirty work. I'm meeting somebody. Somebody as in, mind your own business. Nina turned her face away, the disdain in her voice undisguised, the same cheeky kid she'd always been. He won't be happy. He'll live. It'll do him good to not get his own way all the time. Remind him he isn't the big shot he thinks he is. Besides, I told you, I'll probably drop in later. 5 minutes back and already it was as if I'd never been gone. You're supposed to take me to the King Pot if neither of us shows up. I would have taken you if you wanted to go. I'll return the car, but I'm not staying. No offence, brother. You've got better things to do. He won't be pleased, Nina. She went into her pocket and handed me her business card. Yeah, she said. I think you're right. Shame.
Wow. So we're just going to slide back into the questions after that amazing reading where you're just like, you want to know more about all these characters. So on that note, if you could pick any actor today to play each of your main characters in a TV or film adaptation of the book, who would you pick and why? And this question was just because I know that a lot of books sort of like strike Gillian Galbraith. It's not. It is Galbraith, but it's wrong. Well, she is J.K. Rowling, or Robert Galbraith. That's what I don't know why I'm thinking of Gillian Galbraith at all. And then obviously you've had like The Death in Paradise, and there's a long list I think of all these crime thriller books that have been like turned into TV series. I think now with lockdown, people are just saying, well, what can we use to get the people like to watch our TV programs? So you've noticed that a lot of them are obviously all sort of based on books or it's been turned into films and things like that. And I just wondered, had you thought about that? Had you thought like any like actors that could play like Nina and Danny and Luke and Oliver as well? Or are you like, nah, that's just something that just doesn't interest you at all?
Well, I've thought of two characters. For Danny Glass, I think Andrew Scott would make a good Danny Glass. Now, Andrew Scott, you may not know that name, but you'll remember him. He was the guy who played Moriarty in the Sherlock series that was on television. He was the mad Professor James Moriarty, the mad genius, psychotic genius. There's I think he's a great actor, and he can. Although he was very whimsical in that part, that's because that's what that called for. That's how it was written. I think he's got a tremendous menace to him, and of course, Danny Glass is a kind of darkly humorous, dreadfully menacing person that you really don't want to cross. And I think that Andrew Scott would do a good job on that. As for Luke, who's really the hero, if there is a hero in the story, I guess he's the one redeemed to a degree character. And I think Richard Madden would make a good Luke. Richard Madden, you'll remember him perhaps. He was in the TV series The Bodyguard when he was a bodyguard to Keely Hawes when she was the Home Secretary. He was terrific in that. He's a Scottish actor. In fact, Andrew Scott's Irish and Richard Madden's from Elderslie or somewhere in Renfrewshire. So I can see him being a great. He'll do a great London accent, I'm sure. But I can see him being a great Charlie Cameron as well. So if he's out there, I've got a gig for him.
Definitely, yeah. That's it, yeah. So how did you decide where you were going to set Family? Was there any ever chance of it there being like a Glasgow crime thriller? Because obviously Charlie Cameron was Glasgow, and obviously you're probably known for most people as a cat noir author, like primarily set books in Glasgow. Was there any ever chance of it being a Glaswegian crime family, or was that too close to? I know you're a good friend of Anna Smith, and I know obviously Anna's got our Kerry. She's gone into like the gangland thrillers with Kerry. I can't remember what the character's surname is, but did you ever think about Glasgow, or were you always wanting to go out kind of move out of the sort of like cat noir crime thriller, sort of like pigeonholed?
Well, I don't think I have moved out of Tartan Noir because I'm Scottish. I think the qualification is not that it's set in Scotland. I think, well, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's written by a Scottish geezer, so I qualify in that respect. But as to where it was set, as I said, it was always going to be London, and it was never going to be Glasgow because I've got my alternate reality Glasgow with Charlie Cameron, with Sean Rafferty. In fact, there's going to be another Charlie Cameron book coming out in October. I'm almost finished writing it. So it was always going to be London. You know, every place has got its own vibe if you're a writer. It's about kind of tapping. When I wrote and so it began in New Orleans, I've been to New Orleans and it was easy to catch the vibe there. been to Pakistan, so out of the silence, it was very, very evocative place in terms of sights and sounds and tastes and smells. Very easy to capture some of that and put it into a crime story. Glasgow's the same, but in its own different way, and London is the same in its way as well. I mean, London is kind of famous. Many of the streets they drive around and the action takes place in are world famous, or tremendously well known. So London's kind of a big canvas. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of stuff goes on. Really, anything can happen there. And of course, it's a multi-ethnic society. So really, the possibilities are endless. If you add all that to my already self-confessed love of London, I just like the whole energy of the place. And I know it's not perfect. Nowhere is. We're in Crete tonight, and I can tell you it's bloody freezing. So it's nowhere's perfect. So no, it was always going to be London.
Wow. So would you ever consider like a Greek set crime drama, or is that kind of a kind of a difficult one, or would it be feasible to being an English writer to write about Greece, or would you have to obviously have it translated to make it worthwhile, or?
It doesn't call to me. It doesn't call to me. It's a fantastic setting. And as a matter of fact, we live about 20 kilometres away from Hanya, and Hanya features in one of Donald McDermott's books quite strongly. We live close to there. Every day I wake up and the mountains are over here, and the sea, the Mediterranean's just down there. You can see it all. It's a panoramic view. There's all sorts of skullduggery goes on, I'm quite sure, as there is everywhere. But I'm not a part of any of that. And really none of that would matter if I was drawn to write something here. But I'm not. Having said that, in the next Charlie Cameron book, it almost features, there's a Greek guy called Yanis, and he is from Crete. And he has a lot of part to play in the next Charlie Cameron book. But as a location, as a setting for one of my books, not so far.
Okay. Well, the most exciting thing is the new Charlie Cameron, but I have noticed that you've been sharing about, I think, is this a sequel to A Family that you've been sharing?
It is indeed, and thanks for mentioning it. It gives me a chance to plug it.
Yeah, it was going to be a question, but I thought, well, I might as well, while you're talking about Charlie Cameron, I might as well plug this one as well.
Well, on the day that Family was released, the publisher put the follow on the second book, because there are three proposed to begin with, and I've started the third one as well. But the second one, the first one's out, Family, it's high in the charts tonight actually. The second one,
Wow.
Insider, is on pre-sale. So for anybody out there who hasn't got it on their Kindles already, give it a click. It's out. It was published probably on the 1st of July. So they've got it out on early pre-sale, and they're looking for big things from it. It's very exciting.
Definitely. So is there anything? So you did say it was meant to be a 3-book series. Is that right? Are you still going to go for that, or would you like to like expand it to maybe like a 4-book series, or do you think 1 and 2 is enough to cover the characters?
Originally, the publisher commissioned me to write 3 books, 3 gangland books. And the idea I had was that it would be the same family. My original idea was that it would end there, but I now think that it won't end there, and that what will happen is that the Glass family will go on. But one of the important things, and it's worth mentioning this, I want to write a different book every time. I don't want it to be a regurgitation of the same kind of stuff. There are many possibilities. They aren't endless. They aren't endless in anything you would write. But I want to write the second book already written. It's with the publisher. They love it, but it is different from the first book. It takes up the action 6 months after the first book finishes. And the next book will continue from there. And after that, we'll see.
Yeah,
I
that's
hope.
it. It's $1 million question. But I mean, I think there's a huge scope for the books because they are really interesting characters, and obviously it's kind of you want to see Oliver get his comeuppance, but you also want to see Luke break away from the family. And it's kind of that, you kind of get embroiled with the characters. You start to feel like you know them so well, and they just jump out the pages at you, and you're like, yes, I want. By the end of the book, I want Nina to have done this, and I want this to have happened, and that to have happened, and you know that you kind of hoping that the book will continue because you just want to find out more about these characters and stuff.
Well, I think if you've done your job, maybe brought the reader into a world that doesn't exist, a world that you've created, and a world that they're comfortable to stay in. It's like if you read a book and you really like it, and then, for example, someone said to me they read Games People Play, and then shortly after they read the second one, which has been reissued and it's called The Wronged. Uh, he said to me, he said it was because I've read the first one and now I'm reading the second. His description was, he said it was like going to somewhere on holiday that you'd been there before. So you knew stuff, you knew things. There were familiarities in there that were comforting, and you clung to them and ran to them and helped your overall enjoyment of the thing. I kind of got that, and I'm thinking that won't go lost. That won't go lost as the Glass family move on. We'll be keeping that as there'll be a tremendous core continuity to the thing, but the action will change and some of the other things will change as it has to.
So, what was your favourite location and family to create and write about? Was there any particular place that you thought, yeah, this is where I want to start the action, or that maybe you
Well,
just
I knew I was starting the action on that high rise that goes up in the page 3 or something. But one of my favourite places to write was, I enjoyed all the locations actually. I liked the fictitious pub that Danny owns, called the King of Mesopotamia. Now, London's got 4,000 pubs or 6,000 pubs or 8,000, thousands of pubs, and some of them have very, very fanciful names. They're not all the George and Dragon. There was one in the Old Kent Road one time called the Frog and Nightgown. Who knows why that was ever came to be. My wife used to years ago used to run a pub up in the West End called the Tom Crib, named after a boxer. For somewhere in my mind, it just arrived that this pub that Danny Glass owns should be called the King of Mesopotamia, and it's shortened to the King Pot when they discuss it. And I liked writing that location because there he is, completely off his rocker, ruling South London with an iron hand, with his jukebox over against the wall with all the Who and the Kinks and the Small Faces and all those 60s pop records that he plays up full volume all the time, with his photograph of the Queen up behind him on the wall. Yeah, I really enjoyed that whole, and people come to see him. Oliver Stanford, the bent police officer, he comes to visit him. Luke comes to visit Danny. It's almost like the Mecca. It's the centre. It's actually really the centre of the book in many ways. That was good fun to write.
so. Do you have a particular favourite character? I think you've already mentioned that you have a favourite character, but was there any reason why that you chose this particular character as your favourite?
Well, I told you that Danny is my favourite character, and it really is because he's kind of super quirky with all these things like the jukebox. I mean, as the book goes on, the music is almost like a soundtrack. The 60s music that he loves, the Who and all those kind of people. And even close to the finale, when terrible things are going on, he's got the Who blasting out of this ghetto blaster. I really enjoyed him because he's quirky and he's dark. I mean, I know he's ill. I know he's unstable, but I liked him. I like him. Um, he's a horrible, terrible individual, but there's a puckish humour to him that appeals to me, and I was more drawn to him as a character than anyone else in the book, really.
Wow. Yeah, I would actually say sometimes most people do. They go for the underdog or the character. Some folk do tend to go for the main character, and that can not that's fine. But there are like the other characters that you're like, oh yeah, I like them because they've got a personality that's more like myself, or a personality that you can see them being a sort of like favorite character or that kind of thing. Which I think each to their own. So I'm just gonna uh, ask a question. So, has anybody out there got any questions to ask Owen? Has anybody, you've got the chance now to ask any questions to Owen that you would like to ask any budding authors out there that would like to ask any questions? Yeah, everybody's always shy. That's it. You know, you can go at events and you're just sat there and there's a sea of all these people's faces and they're just like, you know, you just don't want to be the first person to ask the question. Well, I mean, and I know Saturday's obviously a busy time for everybody. Probably everybody's watching the whatever's on TV tonight, the Masked Singer or anything like that. So what I'll do is tomorrow I'll reshare the video, and you can obviously ask leave some comment questions and we'll try and get them answered for you. And also we'll try and set a question for you to win a copy of Family as well. It's an ebook copy, isn't it?
Yes, it is an ebook copy. Yeah,
An
and I
ebook
do have
copy.
a question. You asked me earlier which actors would I imagine playing the characters, and I said to you Andrew Scott as Danny Glass and Richard Madden as Luke. But we really haven't managed to establish who would be Nina. So my question would be, which actress should in the movie or the TV series, I'll settle for either, which actress should play the sister, Nina Glass?
Great question. Yep. So I'll just go back to my ones and I'll just carry on. So if you had a chance to go back and change anything in Family, would you? Would you do it, or would you not? Are you quite happy with the way the way the obviously the feel of it, the tone of it, or is there anything that's obviously niggled at you, or people have even said maybe, oh, should you change that or put that word in it, or
Okay, well, often when I write a book and I look back on it, I sometimes think I would have do that differently, or he should have said that, or maybe developed this or that a bit more. But in the glass, within Family, because there's already another book and then another book after that, I've got all the opportunities to expand and develop and change and explore that I could never want. So there's no need for me to be stuck with a conundrum with saying, oh, well, a problem, should I change this or that? If anything occurs to me that I want to change, I will change it, or I will emphasize it, or play it up or play it down, because there's space to do that. I've got at least two books more to do that.
yeah, that's it. I mean, I think the downside to this lockdown is a lot more people have obviously had time to sit in their house and read books. And I've noticed myself as a blogger and vlogger that some of the reviews are very petty now. And you just think it's maybe just they didn't like a character or they didn't like in location, or it wasn't to what they thought it was going to be, and they are very quite hurtful. And you think, you're like, this poor author's getting bombarded with all this. So you should have done this, and this, and it would have been a brilliant book. And you think, if I was to see that, my heart would like break, because I'd be like, literally put my blood, sweat, and tears into this book, and you would just be like, I don't. That's another reason why I think a lot of people, modern authors, don't want to take that leap, because they're like scared of the sort of harsh remarks that people can give them. Do you have any problems with that, or are you just like water off a duck's back, and it's like, just let it be kind of thing?
Well, it's not water off a duck's back. That would be to minimise it to a wrong degree. It's important to remember that everyone has an opinion. Everyone's convinced their opinion is right, including me. And to not take any of it as gospel. If someone tells me I'm a genius, of course I want to believe them. If someone tells me the book's terrible, of course I want to think they're wrong. The best thing to do is steer a middle course, not believe any of it too strongly, so that I don't get too high or too low, and stay in the middle. Remembering, of course, that it's only opinion. It's only opinion. It's not necessarily the truth. Not every type of book is for every individual. Gangland is not everyone's cup of tea. I get that. So what I would say to anybody, if Gangland's not your cup of tea, don't buy Family. Unless perhaps you want your mind changed, because it is a bit different. It's not, as you said at the start, Lindsay, it's not your usual Gangland thing.
Yeah.
So no, on the reviews, it's important to, it can't be a stake through your heart every time someone gives you. Having said that, I've had very few poor reviews on any of my books actually. Overwhelmingly, it's all been fantastic. And if you look on Amazon tonight, you'll see that the Family, the reviews are just fantastic, really raving. And of course, then I say, well, that's great. But what I have to say as well, I'm really pleased with that. But calm down and take my own advice on a minute ago, and keep the heed, as they say in Scotland.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So did you have any when your publisher actually got hold of obviously you talk about Christine, and I'm assuming Christine's your wife, when she read it, but was it when your publishers read it, was there anything that they wanted you to change? Because I know obviously a lot of Scottish authors talk about getting that their first draft back. It's got all the red marks on it, with all the Scottishy words, or the kind of like, what was it, like accent, or like the accent kind of thing, saying, oh, that person, we don't understand that word, or that wouldn't translate well. Was there anything like that with Family, that you found that they said that we don't like that word, or there's too much swearing in it? Which I didn't find, because
Okay, well, first of all, Christine is my wife, um, and we work together on the books. We put the plots together. We do the character. We develop the thing. We speak about it. And when I write a draft, I write a scene. I give it to her. She edits it, gives me some comments back. She's got tons of ideas. We talk about them. If they're working for both of us, we put them in. So she doesn't come into that scenario you're talking about. On this occasion, that has never happened to me, by the way, where an editor has sent me back something and said, I think you should do this, I think you should do that. They have said a couple of tiny things that are of no consequence. On Family, the editor who actually signed me read the book. When she read it the second time, they read it the second time for structural reasons, trying to see that the plot hangs together. They're not looking for spelling mistakes and all that kind of thing. That's other people do that. She said, I won't give you any editorial advice because, quite frankly, you don't need any. I like the book just as it is. It's fabulous. So I didn't have to do anything else there. That was great.
That is brilliant, actually, because you always, um, you always hear them say that. I don't know if it's a jokey thing. It's always got the red lines, like the certain words like Glaswegian or like sort of slang words that are only Scottish that English readers wouldn't understand or American readers wouldn't understand. And you're like, all right, okay. And a
Well,
lot,
that's a kind of different point. You know, in the first Charlie Cameron book, Games People Play, Patrick Logue is sidekick. No, not Patrick Logue, the big issue seller outside the Italian centre. When Charlie passes, he keeps shouting Robert Burns quotes at him. And of course, that's in Burns chat. And that book was actually translated into German. It's been published in German. I have no idea how they got on with Robert Burns in German, but my my agent at the time did say that could be a problem for translation. I guess it was
yeah,
right.
oh,
But on
definitely.
that point, I think if you're writing authentically, you've got to try to. I don't write accents because I think accents are difficult to read on the page. Um, but if you're writing authentically, you've got to speak in the vernacular to a degree at least. Um, that's what they do wherever you are. So that happens in South London. It happened in Pakistan. It happened in New Orleans when I wrote books set there, and it happens in family. I don't change that.
Yeah, I think it works. It works if you don't put it, because then you can kind of start to alienate people and things like that. So you've got a big fan base that maybe like a certain aspect. If you start changing, it does you do kind of find that people will be alienated by it and then go,
Yeah,
well, I'm not going to read that kind of thing because I don't really like the way this has gone. So then they don't want to read you go back and read you again because you kind of, it's like a weird little hamster wheel, of like, how do you go about satisfying everybody that read your books, because you're never going to do that because everybody's going to have like a particular thing that they might not like, or they might think, oh well, I
yeah, yeah.
realize that wouldn't happen kind of thing, and kind of just be put off reading any further. But I think you do tread a fine line with it. But I think you actually manage really, really well. And I wouldn't say that I have read books by some authors and I thought I like that series, but I didn't really like that the other one they set up. I was more for this one, um, and it's you kind of then if they start to go off onto another tangent, you're like, nah, I'm just gonna follow the books that I kind of like. But I think I love the fact that you've always been able to sort of you kind of go to Charlie Cameron and you're like, yeah, I really really like him, and then you obviously moved into the next one. You brought the inspector, the police sergeant, and then into different characters and followed it, and then read Family. And I'm not a big thriller, crimeland, gangland kind of person, and I actually really loved. I loved Family. I thought it was great,
Good.
and I was like, it was not my kind of books, to
Good.
be honest with you, but I really
Well,
enjoyed it. So
it turns out it is your kind of book.
yeah, I would actually say I probably would read. I would probably keep reading them. Some of them I've read, I'm going like, no, but I actually kind of quite like it because it's kind of, like it's really well read, well written, and things like that. To the point that you like the characters are likable and things like that, and you can kind of see that kind of thing happening. Some of them are just gruesome for being gruesome, and they just take. It just kind of like they have to throw everything in, like the blood and the gore and all that, and you're like, it kind of gets lost. I'm not a big fan of Scandi crime because I don't. I don't like the politicalness. I know there is politicalness, but I think it's very political and very hard to understand, or hard to follow. And when I sat and watched the Stig Larsson films, I actually had to sit in the one with Daniel Craig. I actually sat Wikipedia and I actually followed the synopsis on my phone while I was watching the film because I couldn't understand what the heck I was watching. I mean, I think I got like to the first chapter of the book and I was like, no. But my friend, she absolutely loves it and she understands everything, and I'm just kind of like, I don't think it's. Somebody said, oh, it's because it's been translated. That's what it is from from Swedish to English, and I'm like, no, I've read translation. I've got a lot of Icelandic books, translated books that I've been given to read, and I have no problem. I just don't. I'm not a big fan of that kind of style books. That's just my personal thing. But if somebody could come out with one that was like more, I don't know. I think I'm just kind of thinking wanting one more like Shetland, like Anne Cleeve's Shetland, because that's kind of got that kind of style to it, but it's not. So I'm very picky. People say, oh no, you just like everything. I'm like, no. There are some things that I go, no, unless you give me something like family, where I change my mind and go, actually, I'm really quite enjoying this. This is actually not what I thought. Kind of reminds me of like the old sort of like 70s sort of gangland thriller kind of thing, TV shows that you used to see on TV and stuff like that. But I like a lot of old vintage stuff, so I'm like, oh well, this kind of reminds me of like the kind of Cray twins, that kind of stuff. Oh well, I kind of like watching those kind of things. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm enjoying this. Getting to the end going, I really, really enjoyed that, which I think is a good sign of a good author. Just to end the last question, if you could write a sort of prequel to Family, what sort of character would you like to write about, or would you do all the characters pre to like Luke coming out of prison, or would you kind of like want to focus on one character?
If I could tell me that again, Lindsay.
So if you could write a prequel, so a prequel to Family, so
prequel.
Sort of like
If I could write a prequel to Family.
Yeah.
What would it be?
Yes.
Okay, well, if there was a prequel to Family, it would have to be about the two young villains. It would have to be about the young Danny and the young Luke and the younger Nina, and it would have to be the beginnings as criminals, where they started. You'll remember in Family, they start their life off. We're told he remembers how they used to steal cigarettes from the corner shop. The Indian guy would chase them. That's how they started out as young tearaways. So it would be like that, and we would see some of the early signs of Danny's cruelty, and some of the early signs and some of the early reasons why Luke looked up to his big brother so much. We would see also a different side of Danny, where he is the caring brother who could have, when their mother ran away, could have easily sat back and had let them be taken into care. His younger brother and sister be taken into care because their father was incapable through his alcoholism of looking after them, and he stepped into that breach. Which again proves that although he may be a psychotic monster, he's not all bad. So that might be quite interesting. But we actually I touch on all those points in Family in the present day as it is in that book. So we know that all that has actually happened without having to read a whole bloody book to get there.
Yeah. So thank you very much for doing this to tonight, Owen.
You're welcome. Thank you. I want to thank you. I want to thank you. You do a lot of great work.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, I'm going to share this tomorrow with the question for people to win the book, and then obviously next we'll give it a week, and then we'll announce the winner of the ebook copy of Family, and then I'll also put in the comments the links so you can have a look at the other books in the series, plus Family, plus the next one in the Family trilogy.
Insider.
Insider. I see. I need to write these down. So we'll put that all in the comments for you to have a look at. And thank you so much for coming on and just like giving up some of your busy Saturdays, everybody. I mean, if you have any questions to Owen, you can leave them in the comments, and I'll try and get them to him, and he can maybe like sort of answer them for you. But thank you so much, everybody, and have a lovely
Thank you very much.
Saturday night. I'm just going to
Bye-bye.
end the podcast.